Welcome to Primer for Roof Design in Sketchup. I'm Drew Murphy, a general contractor. This is the first of 3 tutorials on designing roof systems with Sketchup. It's intended for those of you who are looking for a simple yet comprehensive way to design roof systems, but are new to Sketchup. This primer will prepare you to follow the next 2 tutorials with confidence. If you already use SketchUp, skip this primer and move on to the tutorials, which are Simple Roof Design in SketchUp and Complex Roof Design in SketchUp. I'm using a PC, but SketchUp works the same on Macs. It is best if you have a 3-button mouse, though. Chances are you're using the free version of SketchUp, now called SketchUp Make. I'm using SketchUp Pro, which has some great extra features that we will not be using in these tutorials. This is the screen that will welcome you when you first start SketchUp. Let's arrange our working environment and clean things up a little bit. Let's get rid of this welcome screen, but before you do, unclick Always Show on Startup so it doesn't bother you again, then click on Start Using SketchUp. This fellow is Derek. I'm going to select him, press the Delete key to clear the workspace. Before we go any further, it's good to know that SketchUp has some excellent help available. Right up here on the Help menu item, click on Knowledge Center, and it will take you to the Help site where you can search for anything you want, or you can simply go through some of these items here. A good place to start is the Start Here. Let's go back into SketchUp, and let's modify our work environment to make it easier to use. The first thing we'll do is change our toolbar. If you go up to View, Toolbars, you'll get a dialog that shows all the various toolbars that are available that you can add to augment your SketchUp. What is selected by default is the Getting Started toolbar. We'll uncheck that and then select the Large Toolset toolbar, which gives us many more items, many more tools to use, the tools that we'll be needing to design roofs. Now I'm using a PC. SketchUp works essentially the same on a Mac, and they tell me it is a wonderful environment to use SketchUp in. One thing to remember is the Control key, which is a modifier key we use all the time, is equal to the Command key on a Mac. Now, in a Mac version of SketchUp, when you click on View, you will instead see a Tool Palettes option. When you select the Tool Palettes, you'll see a large toolset entry, a Google entry, and an entry for each extension that you've installed. Extensions are scripts. They're Ruby scripts that extend the functionality of SketchUp. They're very, very handy, but we won't be using any on these tutorials. Now, to see a full list of tool sets on the Mac, you have to click the gray bar at the top of the interface and then click on Customize. Now, I haven't used a Mac with SketchUp, and so I just read those instructions to you, and best of luck to you Mac users out there. Click on Close. Then let's go up to the Windows menu item, or Window menu item, and then select Preferences. Select Template, and here choose the Architectural Design template where the units are in inches. This should be chosen by default for you. Just make sure that it is selected. And then go over to Shortcuts. Shortcuts are hotkey sequences that you can use to open a tool or do various functions from the keyboard. As you get used to SketchUp, you'll find that always going to the menu or the toolbar to select a tool gets to be fairly cumbersome, and keyboards are much, much faster, and after a period of time you will use them all the time and rarely go and select tools from the toolbar. So let's see how that works. There are predefined hotkeys set up, shortcuts. Here's a little graphic of I think some of them. L for line, E for eraser, space bar to select the select tool, M for move, C for circle, A arc, R rectangle, all pretty obvious. Q for rotate, S for scale, Shift Z, zoom extents, etc. I'll leave this up for a little bit. Maybe you'll take a screenshot of it and save it. So let's see how those things are defined within the Shortcuts System Preference dialog. Let's find out how the shortcut for line L is defined. If we go up here to the menu, first of all, I'm going to cancel out of this because I can't get to the menu otherwise. If I go up to the menu and select the Draw menu item, you'll see that the tool here, the Draw tool line, has a hotkey, a shortcut of L. Let's go back into Window, Preferences, Shortcuts, and then let's scroll down to find the Draw menu header. And there's Draw Line. We can select it. Then over here on Assigned, you can see that L is the shortcut that has been assigned. We can assign another shortcut in addition to L, as long as it hasn't been assigned to something else. I'm going to try Control-Shift-Z. Press that, and now Control-Shift-Z has been assigned to L. I actually don't want that, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And so on. So the trick here is to find out what the menu item is, and then within the Shortcuts dialog, scroll down to you can find that menu item and then assign your shortcut key to it. Another thing I like to do in my environment, Window, Preferences, is to use small tool buttons. By default, you will have the large tool buttons selected, and I find they just take up too much space, and so I like to select small tool buttons. Where is that? Workspace, Workspace. Preferences, Workspace, deselect use large tool buttons. Let's talk about navigation for a second. The Orbit tool, available here, or on the camera menu item, Orbit. You see it has O as its hotkey. Puts us into orbit mode. Clicking on the left mouse button and then moving the cursor allows us to go ahead and rotate around our model. Holding down the Shift key while moving the cursor puts you into pan mode. Letting go of the Shift key, back in orbit mode. It's actually easiest to go ahead and access orbit using the middle button on the mouse, the cursor wheel, pressing down on it. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and click on the space bar, which is the hotkey sequence, to put you back into the select mode. So if you click down on the middle mouse button, you can see that it puts you right into orbit mode. If you keep that button down and click on the Shift key, it puts you into pan mode. This is what we will primarily be using to go ahead and to navigate around. In addition, on the scroll wheel, if we go ahead and scroll in or out, forward, backward, we zoom in or out. I'm told that on Macs with a one-button mouse, if you click and hold the Control and Command keys simultaneously while clicking and holding the left mouse button, you will temporarily activate the Orbit tool. And once again, I'm rating this, guys, so best of luck to you on the Macs. The camera menu item gives you, well, controls the way that you're actually looking at your model. Standard views is useful. You can see that these are the standard orthographic views that you would have on a drawing: top, bottom, front, back, right, left, etc. So clicking on top, you're looking right down on the blue axis. Camera, standard views, front, etc., etc. I'm scrolling. Another thing to note is the projection that you're actually looking at. Currently we're in perspective view, and let me illustrate the difference. I like to use parallel projection, but it's personal preference. I'm going to go to standard views again, click on top, and you can see that the blue axis right here is visible. It's so we're not obviously looking directly down on this item because there is perspective involved. If I go up to camera and select parallel projection instead, you can see that we are now looking directly down the blue axis from a top view. So we have our rectangle. Our rectangle is made of edges and a face. So the face is defined by the edges. If we delete one of these edges, I'm going to select it and just press the delete key, the face disappears. I'm going to undo that, edit, undo. In the future I'll just use a hotkey sequence to do my undos. So each one of these things, these edges and this face, are called entities. This two-dimensional object rectangle is made up of all of these entities. With the select tool, I can select any entity individually, or by holding down the shift key I can select them. I can select multiple entities, or I can deselect them keeping the shift key held down. It just basically toggles. You can also select all the entities by triple clicking or by drawing a bounding box, holding down the left mouse button and moving from the right to the left or from the left to the right. These operate a little differently. From the right to the left, any entity that is partially enclosed within the bounding box will be selected. As you can see, so let's try that again. So it'll be the upper edge, the right hand edge, this one sort of middle edge, and then the face will be selected. If I do this and go a little farther, it'll be the upper edge, right edge, the lower intermediate edge, and the right lower edge, and the face will be selected. Oh yes, also the bottom edge. You get the idea. However, it's a little different if you go from left to right. In this case, it has to be completely enclosed in the bounding box to be selected, so we will only get the left edge selected. Go a little farther, we'll get 3 edges selected here, and so on. Another way of selecting everything is to use a hotkey, and that would be Control A. There we go, Control A, Control A. The eraser tool works as you might expect it. Select it, click on the entity that you wish to erase. I'm going to undo, or you can hold down the left mouse button and drag it across those entities you wish to erase. Undo. If you hold down the shift key while you select an entity, you hide it. And if you look, that edge is completely gone. I can't even select that edge because it's hidden. The only way that I can select that edge is to unhide it, or to make hidden items visible. To do that, you can click on the View menu item, and then the Hidden Geometry item or use the hotkey sequence Shift-H, which is what I will do. Shift-H, and it makes that edge visible, though it's in kind of a fine dotted line, so you can distinguish it from a solid edge. I will select it. Here's something called the Entity Information dialog. We get to from the Window, Entity Info selection. This shows information about the entity that you have selected. This is an edge that's selected. This is a normal edge. And this is the hidden edge. And you can see that hidden is checked. I'm going to uncheck it. Also uncheck the smooth item, which we'll get to in just a second. And you can see that it's back to how it was. If you hold down the Control key while in the eraser tool, select, you'll see that it both softens and smooths that edge, which is beyond the scope of this tutorial. If you hold down the Shift and Control key while you select that edge, you undo the soften and smooth. We'll be using the line tool all the time. I'm going to split this rectangle into two rectangles, or two faces, 4 faces, and I can go on with that. Line tool again, and freehand draw a rectangle. You can see the little note there that says I'm on the red axis. I'm going to hold down the Shift key to lock that inference, that direction, on the red axis, so no matter where my cursor is, I remain on the x-axis. Now here I'm freehand drawing. It pretty well snaps to the green axis, and you can see that little red line that goes across, and it is allowing me to snap on other points. Now I'm going to go ahead and hold the Shift key down to lock my line in the direction of the green axis, and then I can go ahead and move to any of these interces, these vertices, and make a selection. Now I'm going to hold the Shift key down to lock on the red axis, so that the length of my line is the same as the length of where that little green dot is, where I'm snapping to, and so on. I can also lock my inferences by using the cursor keys. The upper cursor key will lock me in the blue axis. The right cursor key will lock me in the red axis, and the left cursor key will lock me in the green axis. Right cursor key, up cursor key, and so on. Another useful thing to know with the line tool is that I can divide this line into a number of equal segments by right-clicking on it and selecting Divide. With the cursor key on that line, I can move it back and forth to go ahead and determine how many segments I wish to divide it by, or I can just go ahead and type in the number of segments. Let's say 5, for example. 5, it shows up in the value control box on the lower right, and I press enter, and there we have 5 segments. I'm going to skip the circle, arc, polygon, and freehand tools and move right along to the move tool. Now with the move tool, you can either pre-select the item which you wish to move. I'm selecting this face right here, selecting the move tool, and then once it's pre-selected, I can click anywhere. It doesn't have to be actually on the item, and I can move it. I selected the face. The face is connected to these edges which define it, and so by moving the face, I'm moving all the edges that are attached to it. Basically, I'm clicking escape to get out of that, and now I'm going to click escape again to deselect whatever I had pre-selected. The Move tool is still operational. I'm going to show you hover mode by hovering over the entity that I wish to move. Edge, 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 and then left-clicking on it. I can move that entity. In this case, this edge is connected to two other edges and the face, and so it kind of skews it as I move it. I can go ahead and lock the inference, as we've done before, for example, in the red direction by pressing the right cursor key, for example, which will go ahead and lock the inference no matter where my cursor is, so that I'm only moving that edge along the right axis. Press escape again. I'm going to select this edge. I can select for example, the up cursor key to only move in the blue axis direction, and so on. Pressing escape again. I can also go ahead and use the shift key to lock the inferences as we've done before. So I'm in the green axis direction. I'm holding down the shift key, and you get the idea. Pressing escape once again. The Move tool is actually our copy tool as well. So if I wish to make multiple copies of an item, I do this. Hold down actually just click on the Control key. It toggles the copy mode. If you look at the cursor on the lower right side of it, you'll see a little plus that indicates we're in copy mode. I'm going to hover select this face, click on it, and then click on it again to drop it, and we've just copied the face. Let's undo out of that, and let's try something else. Let's say that I want to copy multiple copies of something, and I want to copy them a certain distance away and have every copy the same distance away. So I'm going to click on the Control key to put myself in copy mode. I'm going to select the face and move it over, and I want to move it over. As you can see in the lower right side, you can see the VCB. Let's say I'm going to copy it over 30 feet, so just type in 30, apostrophe, enter. And now I want 10 copies of this, so I will type in asterisk for the times, and then enter 10, 1, 0, enter. And now I have 10 copies that are exactly 30 feet spaced apart. Let's undo this, and I'll show you how you can do something similar. I'm going to go ahead and copy this face again, press down the Control key, put myself in copy mode, select this face, drag it over, and let's say I want to drag it over, let's try 200 feet. 200 feet, enter. But now I want, let's say I want 5 copies of this spaced evenly within this distance. So I will type in the / key as the divide key and enter 5. So now I have 5 copies that are divided, spaced equally within 200 feet. Okay, so now I want to move one of these copies. I'm using the scroll wheel to zoom. Place it there. Actually, I'm going to press the space key to put myself in the select tool. Select this, then put myself back into the Move tool. Select that corner and put myself down onto this other rectangle's edge and click to copy it there. Now, if I select this face and try to move it, you can see that because the edges are collinear, they become attached. And that when I move one rectangle, it stretches and skews the other rectangle. Pressing escape and undo. Now let's see when I go ahead and move this rectangle down so that it is like this, and it actually intersects in 2 points right here and here. And then I move it. I pre-selected this face. Click on the Move tool. Likewise, because it has intersected at those 2 places. Something to keep in mind. Now often in SketchUp, when the drawing is fairly busy, there's a whole lot of points and edges for it to snap to. So for example, if I wanted to go ahead and move this rectangle's corner right here so that it snaps to this corner right on over here, sometimes when the drawing is very busy, SketchUp doesn't know what to snap to, and so it makes it very difficult. So occasionally it's very useful to go ahead and draw a guideline or a vector. I'm going to use the line tool right here. Then I'm going to select this face, select the move tool, put the move tool on this edge, this line I just drew as a vector, hold down the shift key to lock that inference along this line. Then I'm going to select that rectangle and move it down the line. As you can see, it's locked no matter where my cursor is, it stays on that line, and then when it gets to that corner, I can see that it snaps to that corner, and click on it, and there I am. You can also use the move tool to stretch your entity. In this case, let's just go ahead and stretch this rectangle into a simple roof. So I'm going to divide this face into two faces using the line tool. I'm going to select the middle line, the middle edge. I'm going to then select the move tool, select that edge, but I'm going to go ahead and lock the inference on the blue axis by clicking the up cursor key. There we go, now it's locked. If I press the blue cursor key again, or rather the up cursor key, it basically toggles and undoes the lock. I'm clicking it again, it does the lock. If I click the right cursor, then it locks the inference in the red direction, left in the green direction, and so on, back to locking it in the up and down direction. There we have it. I have a simple ridge, simple gable roof. Let's use the move tool to create a actual solid object, something with 3 dimensions. So, pre-selected the face, the move tool, select it. I'm going to lock it in the vertical direction with the up cursor key, and I'm also going to press the control key, which toggles copy. So click to make a copy higher than the other one. I'm going to use the line tool to connect these two. There's a better way to do this using the push-pull tool. We'll talk about that in a bit. So now we have, it's not a cube, but it's a rectangular solid. And to illustrate some other functions of the move tool, I'm going to make this a group, which we'll talk about at length in a bit. If I triple click on this, I select everything, and then if I right click, then I can either make it a component or a group. Each choice will go ahead and bind all of these separate entities into a single entity. We'll make it a group for the time being. So now we have a group. If we go up to Window, Entity Info, you can see that we have a solid group with this particular volume. I'm going to name this group G1. With the Move tool, as we know, we can pre-select or use hover mode to select. Move it anywhere we want. But in addition, you can see that there are these handles that show up on each plane of an axis. And if you select one of these handles, you'll get what looks like a protractor. And then if you select that, you can move it. If you look at the VCB in the lower right, you can see degrees of rotation. You can enter the degree that you wish to rotate, or it will typically snap in 15-degree increments. I will undo this. Now I'm going to press the space bar to get back into the select tool. Double click on this group so that I'm in edit mode. Going to select an edge and then select the move tool again to show you what happens. We already know that this edge is connected to other edges, and so they have to move in unison. Now, if you press the Alt key, this will toggle something called auto fold, which will allow you to go ahead and have a little greater freedom of movement when you move this edge. So I'm going to move it there, and you can see that we've created another edge right here on this side, and we've created two new faces. Let's get back to that by undoing and trying this again. Now I've selected that edge again, and I'm moving it around, but you can see that these side faces are constrained and are not folding. So it's allowing me to go ahead and move this, but constraining these two sides so that they remain in a single plane. However, if I press Alt, I am no longer constrained. Now it creates an automatic new edge and allows me to go ahead and move this edge in all sorts of directions. Let's talk about groups and components. Previously, we made this a group. You can see the information in the entity info. Let's go to Window and select Outliner. This brings up the Outliner dialog. Outliner dialog goes ahead and shows you all components and groups and their nesting within your entire model. So we had named this entity G1, and there it is. Using the move tool, I copy this, make a copy of it. You can see that it shows up again, a duplicate. I can name that G2. If I select both of these and right-click to bring up the context menu, I can make both of these either a group or a component. I'm going to make them a group. And you can see how they're nested. So this is a group of groups. I'm going to make another copy of this. Copy it over here. I'm going to explode it for the sake of argument. I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to make this group into a component. Now I can make it, I can directly change it from a group to a component, or I can explode it so that it is back to being just a bunch of individual entities that are not grouped yet. I can right click on those, and then I can select make a component. When I do that, this dialog pops up, which allows me to go ahead and name this component. I'll just keep that for default right now and select create. Within the outliner, you can see that there is now a component called component number 1. Now I want to make a copy of this component using the move tool again. Now I have two components named the same thing. Now Let's go back over here and select Group 2. I'm going to double click on it and put myself into edit mode, and I'm going to just change it. I'll use the line tool and split this face for the want of something better to do. You can see that I edited that single component by itself. However, if I come on over here and select one of these components as opposed to groups, and I put myself into edit mode, you can see that when I select this face or this face or this face or this face or this edge, its copy over here, the same thing happens. And so if I edit this, for example, I'll move this face, it edits the other copy. Why? Well, the reason is that when you create a component, you're creating an exact copy of that component, but it's not so much that it's an individual component, it's an instance of that component. So that component consists of a series of definitions, a combination of all these edges, lines, and however they're put together into an entity called a component. And then when we create a copy of this component, what we're doing is actually just creating an instance of it. So if we edit either one of these, we're editing all of them at the same time. This is very convenient for a number of reasons. And by the way, I want to show you right now, what you're seeing right now on the screen, you're seeing something called clipping. And I won't go into any detail on that, but it happens. And so when you do see clipping, what the cure is to select, and where's that little devil? Zoom extents. And it looks like the large toolbar does not have an icon for that. So click on Zoom Extents, and what that does is it fills your screen with whatever objects that you have on the screen and readjusts everything. That's the cure for it. So getting back to components versus groups. So for the most part, we'll be creating groups. Their components have a lot of advantages. First of all, since you only have a single definition of multiple instances of a component, you have a whole lot less overhead as far as storage requirements and the number of actual entities that you're storing. The definition consists of basically one component, and then you're just making virtual copies, as it were, of this component for its other instances. Whereas when you make a copy of a group, you're creating a separate, complete new definition of that group each and every time. The other benefit of a component is that if you have a lot of components that are the same, for example, maybe common rafters on a roof, if you create those as components, if you edit one, you edit all of them. For example, if you create a bunch of rafters and you need to cut a bird's mouth, instead of having to cut that bird's mouth 20 times for 20 rafters, you simply go ahead and cut it once in one of the components, and all of the components update automatically. It's very handy. The downside of that is that sometimes you will find yourself in a situation where you want to edit a component to make it distinctly different from the other components. And when you do that, you have to remember to do this. Right-click on that component and make it unique. Then, now this is a unique component. It is not an instance of other components. When you edit it, you are only editing that one component. As you can see, this component here, which was identical to the other component, has changed. And also, in the outliner, you can see that by making it unique, it has renamed that component. It is now not component number 1, but component number 2. And of course, you can select any of these components and you can rename them to your heart's content. You can rename the definition, or you can rename that instance of the component. In this case, we'll just call it I2. So getting back to components and making them unique. So now we have two components, component 1 and component 2. I'm going to select component 2 here, and I'm going to make multiple copies of it. Using the move tool, control toggle to make a copy. I'm going to drop it here. I want to make, let's call it 4 copies. I'll type in / for divide, and then 4 and enter, and now I have 4 copies of this component, equally spaced along the line between the, whatever, you get the idea. Once again, if I could put myself into edit mode for one of them, I'm putting myself in edit mode for all of them. Now, occasionally, I'm escaping out of this. Occasionally, I want to go ahead and, instead of just making one of these components unique, separate from the other components or the other instances of components, I want to make 2 or 3 or multiples of that component unique, but the same, but different from the original components. For example, I can select this component, and holding down the Shift key, I'm multiple selecting this component, and then when I right-click and make unique, I am making these 3 components unique and separate from these other components, so that if I put myself into edit mode on this component, you can see that it's putting these other 2 components into edit mode as well. Okay, let's talk about the push-pull tool. Let's create a new rectangle. By the way, when you're creating a rectangle, you will see guidelines there, kind of diagonal guidelines. It's either a golden section or it's a square. We'll select a square. And select the push-pull tool. I'm using hover mode select. Push-pull tool acts on faces only, and it will pull or push them in a perpendicular direction. There's that clipping again that we saw before. Now, this large toolbar set, some of the tools are kind of missing when it's on the left side of the screen, so I just moved it to the top, and you can see that there's more tools that actually show. This is the zoom extents tool. Clicking on it goes ahead and zooms it and clears up that problem, which happens on a regular basis. Some people say that that problem happens less when the camera is in perspective mode, but I'm not so sure. I seem to happen both ways, and I kind of prefer the parallel projection mode myself. So you can either pre-select the face that you wish to use the push-pull tool on, like we've done in the past, or you can use hover mode. I'm escaping to deselect that, and then I'm in hover mode, and I can act on any face. As I said, it goes ahead and moves that face in a perpendicular direction only. If you hold the control key, you'll see that familiar little plus sign that modifies whatever tool you're using, and then select the face and move it. You can see that there is an edge. Actually, what it is it creates a new face in between the other face. This is useful at times. Just keep it in your back pocket for now. Let's undo that last step. Spacebar to go to select mode, and let's make a copy of this. Triple clicking it to select everything. Select the move, control to toggle copy, and we've made a copy, and we'll just plop it right on down there. Let's go back into push pull. Hover mode, select. I'm going to move it, and I want to move it precisely 50 foot up. So enter 50 foot, enter. Now I want to duplicate that move in this other item, and all I have to do is select the face that I'm moving and double click it, and it will duplicate the exact move. One thing to note, and I'm going to go ahead and undo that, is that depending on whether this face is inside or outside depends on which direction the double click on the move moves. And I'll show you what that means. Spacebar to deselect and put myself in the select tool. I'm going to select this face. I'm going to right click on it, and then you will see reversed faces here. Select that, and it just turns dark. The light face is the, I think I have this right, the outside, and the dark face would be the inside. So I've just reversed those faces. So I'm going to watch what happens when I go back into the push-pull tool and double click on it. So it moved exactly 50 feet, but it moved in the opposite direction. Let me go ahead and spacebar to get out of that. Right click on that face and reverse faces again, and then go back into the push-pull tool and double click on this outside face, and it moved 50 feet again in the right direction. Now the push-pull tool has some limitations. I'm going to show you what happens with the curved surface. I'm going to select the arc tool, which we don't really need for creating roofs. Select the push-pull tool. And you can see that as long as I'm operating on a flat plane, it will do that. However, if I want to use the push-pull tool on this curved face, you can see that I have a little circle with the cross through it, indicating that it will not work. And if you look down here, or here, it says cannot push-pull curved or smooth surfaces. Now what do they mean by a smooth surface? We saw that before. Let's find out what that means. And select the surface, and then let's go on up here to View and Show the Hidden Geometry. So what you see is a series of vertical lines. I can select these lines now because they're unhidden, and let's open up the Entity Info dialog. It'll show me what this one entity is all about, and indicates that it is both softened and smoothed, which I can undo. If I do that, you can see that it turns solid. And then I can redo the hidden geometry, and you can see that that particular edge, which was previously hidden and smoothed, is now visible. Remember the erase tool? And remember the modifying keys, where I can either go ahead and hold the shift key down to make this a hidden line, a hidden edge, or I can hold down the control key to make it both smooth. Well, that's what we just did. So that's something useful to note within Sketchup, is that circles and arcs and any curved surfaces actually are not really curved. They are a series of actual flat edges. And it just has these two attributes associated with those edges, the soft and smooth, to go ahead and make it appear like it's smooth. Well, you already know that you can use the Move tool to rotate. Let's just try that again. These have not been grouped. They're just groups of, well, just individual entities. I'm going to triple click on this, right click, and make it a group. In addition, I can use the actual rotate tool, which allows me, gives me a fine degree of control for rotation. Now the rotate tool rotates along an axis. As you can see, when I move it onto different faces, it kind of locks onto that. Now if I wish to go ahead and rotate along a specific axis, but I have a hard time getting it to decide which is which, I can put the rotate tool along a face which is aligned on the axis I wish to rotate, hold down the shift key to lock that inference, and then move it to the point I wish to rotate upon. So you select the axis you wish to rotate, an endpoint anywhere. I can select it here and rotate. I can select here and rotate, and then you can enter the degree of rotation that you wish. For example, let's just try 45 degrees. 45, and then enter, and there we have it. I'm going to undo this. Let's rotate along the blue axis, around the blue axis, and what I'm doing is I'm just hovering, in this case over empty ground. If I rotate and then hover over the background, you can see that I'm now on the green axis. If I rotate and then, hello, where are we? There we go. There we go. If I rotate there then and hover on the background, it will get on that axis, but sometimes it's just easier to go ahead and to find a convenient face that's oriented in the direction you wish to rotate. So here again, let's orient around the blue axis, put myself over that face or over this background, hold down the shift key to lock the inference, click on the point I wish to rotate around, and so on. Now, much like the Move tool, I can make copies. So I can select the Control key, and you see our familiar little plus sign on the lower right side of the cursor, and now I can make a copy. I can either enter the angle of rotation I wish, or just freehand it, or try to catch it where it stops on each 15-degree increment. I'm just going to select that for now. And now I want to make 3 copies that are equally spaced along that angular rotation. So just // for divide and 3, and there I have my copies. Very convenient. Escape out of that. So let's mess around with rotating, for example, a face. And this rectangle, we never did group it, so it's just a bunch of individual entities. And well, that's not going to work too well, so I'm pressing the space key to enter select mode, pre-selecting that, then entering rotate. I'm going to hold the shift key to log myself so that I'm rotating around the blue axes. Select that, origin, select this, and then rotate. And you can see that I can stretch and skew that whole shape there. If I click on the Control key, I make a copy. Click on Control key again, and now I'm skewing and warping that rectangular solid. Another useful function that the Rotate tools has is the ability to allow me to do a fold, to actually go ahead and treat a plane, a flat surface, like a piece of origami. So let's make a copy of this. Use the line tool and arbitrarily create an edge, a line there that I wish to go ahead and fold this face on. I select the Rotate tool, move over to the origin, hold down the mouse button, and pull it along the line, the axes that I wish to rotate on, and then let go of the mouse button, the left mouse button, and then extend the cursor. Click on the left mouse button again, and then you can see that I can fold that once two-dimensional rectangle into a little piece of origami, which can be very useful at times. Now, the Follow Me tool is a very, very handy and useful tool, though it gets a little confusing. So there's a number of ways to use it. I'm going to show you what I think is the preferred way. And what this allows you to do is to go ahead and to draw a face and then extrude it along a path. Enter edit mode on this. And let's say that I want to go ahead and do a chamfer along this edge, or this continuous edge all the way around here. So using the line tool, I'll create my chamfer. As you can see that it has turned violet, which indicates that it is a 45-degree line. So I have another little face right there. So I am going to then select the path that I wish to go ahead and run this face along. And there you have it. You can see I've selected this curve and this edge. I could also have double-clicked on this face and then hold the Shift key down and select the face again to deselect the face. I don't think that's actually necessary, but I'm doing it anyway. And then going up to the Follow Me tool, click on it, and despite the fact that the path is now no longer highlighted, it remains in memory. Then I select the face that I wish to extrude. And so there you have it. Now in this case we were left with a little artifact. Sometimes that happens that we have to delete. So let's try that again. Let's do it down here. Using the line tool, I'm just going to connect that right there so that I can draw my chamfer. Line tool again. Violet, so we know it's a 45 degree. Now I'm going to, well, I'm not going to pre-select the edges this time. I'm going to show you the other way to do it. In fact, I'm going to press Escape to make sure I deselect everything. Put myself back into edit mode. And now I'm going to select the Follow Me tool and then the face without pre-selecting the edge. This allows me to drag along the edges that I wish. Now the Scale tool is a very useful tool. I use it all the time to make mirror copies. For example, with this group, let's create a copy using the Move tool, Control key. That's fine, I have an exact copy, but I want to make this a mirror image. So if I select the Scale tool and then select any of these middle handles here, and you can see that its opposite handle is highlighted and connected by a line to indicate along which axes we are going to be scaling. So I select this handle here and I move in the direction I wish to scale, and I type in -1, which indicates that I wish to go ahead and go in a negative direction 100%. Click enter, and there we have it. There we have a mirror image. Now what happens when I do this, I described the difference between a component and a group before. These just happen to be groups. However, you know with a component, And when you modify one instance of a component, it modifies all of the components. Well, the scale tool does not do that. When you scale an actual component, it only scales that instance of a component. It does not modify the other components, which is very useful to know. Now, of course, the scale tool has modifier keys as well. So if I select a handle and scale ordinarily, you can see that it kind of stretches it out. If I hold down the Shift key, it scales it uniformly. So when I move in any direction, it scales in all other directions in a uniform amount. If I hold down the Control key, it scales about the center of the object. Once again, no control keys, no modifier keys, and that's how I'm scaling it. So often we want to scale something in a direction that is not along its axes. For example, let's go ahead and rotate this a little bit. What happens when you create a group or create an object by grouping individual entities? The axis of that group is taken from its parent. So in this case, the parent is the axis of the drawing itself. You can see how the axis is in this. Because we rotated it, the axis of the group itself is not aligned with the axis of the model. Yet, I want to go ahead and scale along the axis of the model. So if I attempt to scale this now, I won't be able to scale it along the axis of the model. I have to scale it along the axes of the group itself. So, to get around this, you can change the axes by using the Axes tool. So I'll double click to get into edit mode, so I'm within the context of this grouping. I go up to the Axes tool, select it, and then I can go ahead and click anywhere I wish the origin to be on this axis, and then drag the axes in the direction that I wish to go ahead and scale it in. In this case, I'm going to just use the axes of this right here, because I know it's in the direction that I want to scale it. So click for the right axis, click for the green axis, make sure the blue axis is going up, right and green axes determine the base plane. So now I'll escape out of this, get back into the group. You can see how the bounding box has changed and actually is in line with the axes of the model itself. So if I go to scale, I can now scale in the direction that I want to. The offset tool is a very handy little item. Select this face, offset tool, occasionally you have artifacts that you have to get rid of, but there you have it. You have basically a new face that is created from an old face by just offsetting either in or out from that face. Let's try this again. Now select the face, select the offset tool, and this time I want to go ahead and I want to offset specifically 6 feet in, so I will type 6 feet. Enter. Shows up in the VCB, and there it is. We have an offset exactly 6 feet all the way around. If you wish to duplicate this, all you have to do is double click on a new face. And once again, there it is. You'll be using the tape measure tool all the time. It's commonly used just to simply get dimensions, find out what size it is that you're building, or to determine a location that you wish to go ahead and draw to. "35 feet, 1 11/16 inches, and so on. I can go ahead and type in a dimension. In this case, let's type in 50 feet. Shows up in the VCB on the lower right, and so now we have specifically a 50-foot distance from this edge. The control key, I will select a spot here. The control key toggles, you see our little plus on the lower right side of the cursor, toggles the guideline. It's off now. If it's off, then basically we just have a vector that we're dimensioning. And with it on, it creates a guideline parallel to the edge that you select. If I select a corner at vertices, no guideline is created, whether or not the control key is toggled. You have to select an edge to get a guide. When you move this, you can control the direction and lock the inference of the direction with the usual ways by holding down the Shift key to lock the inference, in this case in the blue axes, in this case in the red axes, and so on. Likewise, you can use the cursor keys, up for blue, right for red, left for green. Often you want to create a set of guidelines and you want to space them with a specific spacing, so you can use the move copy to do that. I'm going to drag to select this guideline, and then I'm going to use the move tool to copy this guide and copy it along this edge. I'll drop it right here, and then I want to make 5 guides equally spaced within this distance. So I just type in / for the divide. Did I say 5? 5 it is. And then enter, and we have equal spacing of 5. Another useful thing for the tape measure tool that's not widely known is you can scale a component or a group. So I'm going to get a measurement for this length. It shows that it is 70 feet, 3 7/16. I want to make it 60 feet, so I will click here and then now type in 60 feet, enter. It's going to ask me if I wish to resize this model, and I say yes. Now let's find out what dimension it gave me. And so now this is 60 feet. So what happened is it resized the entire model uniformly. It shrunk it down so that this one edge was 60 feet. Very useful. Often you want to go ahead and create a guide point, not a guide line. It's the same thing, but a guide point has to be along an existing edge. It can't just be in the field. So let's go ahead and create a point at 3 foot along this edge. I'm entering 3 foot, enter, and there's our guide point. The dimension tool is very simple to use and pretty well self-explanatory. Select it, select your starting point, ending point, and depending on how you drag it, that is the dimension that you will get. Click to go ahead and drop it. Click it again to move it. The Protractor tool is very useful if you want to determine exact angles for your drawing. Click on it and you get a protractor. You can see that as you move the protractor cursor around to different faces, it kind of snaps to those faces. So if I want to draw an angle starting at this vertices, you can see sometimes it's kind of hard to get it to snap to the correct face that you want. So the best thing to do is to use the inference engine. Go ahead and locate the protractor on the face that you wish to work with. Hold down the Shift key to lock that inference. Now you can move the cursor anywhere you want and it stays at that plane. We talked earlier about how the curves are actually made of individual edges that have been smoothed to look as though they're curves, and that's what you're seeing here. Is that as I move the Protractor tool, you were seeing it snap to each individual face along this curve. Hold down the Shift key and I can lock that. Shift key, I'm locking that, locking the Protractor tool in that plane. So let's go back to this plane. Shift key, lock, select the start, and somewhere along this baseline I will click again, and then I can go ahead and either freehand this or enter a specific angle that I want this to be at, or for the sake of say a roof pitch, a slope, I can enter 4:12 for a 4 and 12 pitch. It shows up in the VCB on the lower right. Click enter, and there I have a roof pitch. Again, I'm going to start at this other angle over here, or rather this other corner over here. Hold down the Shift key, lock the inference, enter 4 and 12. Then we can go ahead and use the guidelines for taking our drawing and doing whatever we wish. Thanks for watching this primer on roof design in Sketchup. In the next two tutorials, simple roof design and complex roof design in Sketchup, I'll show you how to develop roof systems simply and easily. This is Drew Murphy. See you next time.